Aashni, thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks for inviting me to join.
Aashni, you've worked at great companies, Microsoft, Square, and then you went into entrepreneurship, started a bunch of companies. How did you know that this was the right time to jump out of the corporate world and do your own thing?
So, great question. I'm super fortunate that I came from a family of entrepreneurs. So, growing up, I've always seen my dad running our, group of businesses. My uncles, my cousins are all part of it now as well. And it's always kind of just been part of my blood. Or sort of my plan has always been I'm going to go and create my own company at some point. But I knew I wanted to develop certain skill sets before I did that so that when I build the company, it's something that, like I'm bringing something more than just business knowledge. Not saying business knowledge is not valuable, like, dear God, I need more of it, but I wanted to have some sort of specialty that I was bringing in. The funny part is our family or like our family businesses are very non-tech, very like traditional old school, like brick and mortar type shops or businesses. And I'm very much the opposite of that in terms of I'm in the tech startup space. I've worked at tech companies. My background's in software engineering. So it's been really interesting learning from the family members, like the various people in our family business, and then pulling that knowledge and seeing how can I change what they've learned or how can I adapt what they've learned to apply for the way that we work. And also they're in a different country to they're not in North America. And so, that cultural difference and the local ways that businesses run also has an impact on things too.
Mm. And do you feel like a lot of the business knowledge that your family has, even though they're traditional businesses, could be used in whatever you're building, even though it's more modern and more techy?
Definitely. A lot of the same core foundations and principles apply. Do you know your customer? Do you know how to talk to your customer? Do you know how to make them feel heard so that they stay loyal to you and don't suddenly go to another competitor? Whether you're a brick and mortar shop, like one of our companies is a tire selling company, or you're, the latest AI recording, like meeting recording tool, what's going to keep your customer coming back to you over going to them? I think one of the things that doesn't apply in the same way, and it's been fascinating to see this, is how I think about maintainability. So for a regular brick and mortar company, you actually have to spend money every couple of years on refurbishing, like painting, all that touch-up stuff. That's very different to how we would do it in a tech company where it's not necessarily like painting, but there's still bugs that we need to fix. But the way that we manage and handle that is so far my experience has been is very different between the two.
Did you ever consider staying in the corporate world, or did you know you were going to leave eventually?
Well, so I hated the corporate jobs that I had. A mix of reasons. One of them was definitely a terrible manager, and then the other one was love the company, love the team, stay there. Maybe I think I left there at the right time for me because I was getting very bored in just being a developer. It's great for some people. Some of my best friends are developers, like just developers. But for me, I've always known I can do more and I want to do more, and I like, touching in different areas. And I think if I was still in the corporate world today, I'd probably blow my like blow my brains out a little bit at that boredom element.
Yeah, yeah.
Whereas with the stuff that I do today with my startup and then the work I do with the family business, I get to play around with a lot of areas, a lot of fields. And I think for me, it's that constant learning, which I really love.
How do you know it's the right time? I mean, aren't you afraid that you're going to lose the stability of your job, your income? How do you take the step?
I still don't have stable income. That's the fun part of it, like 5 years later. Um,
Yeah.
I think I can only say it was the right time for me retrospectively. The reason I left one of my last jobs, my last corporate job, which was Square, hands down love the company, would always happily recommend them to other people. But they were in Kitchener, and I don't enjoy living in Kitchener. I prefer living in Toronto. For folks that are listening that don't know the difference, Kitchener is a very small town. That's about an hour and a half to the west, I don't know, west of Toronto, which is a major city in Canada. And so it was almost like a really small town vibe where things aren't really open past 6 or 7 o'clock versus Toronto, which is a very big, vibrant city. So from a lifestyle perspective, I needed to move back to Toronto. And that was probably my biggest driver for wanting to leave. It's only after I left and then COVID happened, and I kind of had to just introspect and figure out what is it that I want to do and what are my next steps that I realized part of my uneasy feeling and the reason that I wasn't willing to stay in Kitchener anymore is I was getting really bored in just being a developer. And so that only happened when I sort of sat with myself and thought about it for about 5 to 6 months. In between, I thought about going for product roles instead of engineering roles, because I wanted to eventually go in the startup path. And then as COVID hit, I did have job offers. I ended up turning them all down and started the entrepreneurship path the hard way with no stable income. But it's been quite a journey, and I've loved every moment of it so far.
So
Yes.
let me read this. Vent, moan, or celebrate. We're here to hype you up. What does that mean? What is HypeDocs?
Yeah, so HypeDocs is your AI-powered audio journal. It didn't start that way. If you look on Product Hunt, we have a very different product there. But the idea of it is we as humans are really good at forgetting what we're good at. We are so good at focusing on our mistakes and not celebrating the small wins or the big wins that are happening every single day. And if you look at anxiety, if you look at depression, if you look at people's mental health in general, it's all kind of going downhill in a lot of ways. Um, People have lost a lot of their self-confidence, and the rise of imposter syndrome is also happening as well. A lot of this is I'm heavily focused on supporting women, but these do happen across the board to everybody. And so our hope and desire is that we can help you as an individual regain your confidence and build up your confidence, your self-esteem, and try to fight imposter syndrome. And so the way we're doing that is through this audio journaling tool where all you need to do is log into the app, tap record if you want to speak. If you prefer to type, you can still type and just talk about your day. We have a few prompts in case you need an idea of what to talk about. You can answer those questions. And then once you hit submit, we take that, parse it through our AI engines, and we pull out the small wins and the big wins that you may or may not know. And we highlight those for you. And then in the future, we're going to be providing those in summaries and in reminders. We also have some cool features we're building out around goals, where we want to automate some of the goal aspects of the way you work and the way you think, but using all of that from the single auditory input.
That's really cool. I have my very own little cheerleader that encourages me. So, what does a small win look like?
Yeah, small wins and big wins are different for everybody. It's the same as like if you and I talk about our struggles, your struggles, small and big, are going to be different to mine, and they're on a different scale. And that just comes down to what challenges have I faced compared to what challenges have you faced. Just because your small challenge feels bigger than my big challenge doesn't mean they impact us in different. Like there's still a big impact for me or for you. Some examples of small wins I like to share for myself is a big goal of mine is to create a photo book on the wildlife photography that I take. So small wins for me are being able to go out and take those photos. Um, it's not easy because I can't do it in Canada. It can only happen when I'm in Kenya, and I can only do it for 2 or 3 days because I can't spend my entire time in Kenya and in the wildlife areas, for example. A bigger win in that context is actually editing the photos and starting to compile them into the book, which it's been 6 months and I still haven't done much of that, but I'm at least working on creating the collection of photos. For somebody else, sometimes a small win could be as simple as waking up, making the bed. And the reason that we talk about vent mode and like that we're a judgment-free zone is I'm not going to judge you if your small win is that you were able to get out of bed today. Nobody should judge you for that. Because if you're having a hard time and if you're like you hate your job or you just went through some really personal emotional stuff and your energy levels are low, and for you, a win is being able to actually get out of bed, go to the gym, go for a walk, get some fresh air, cook a meal. I suck at cooking. So for me, cooking a meal is always a win. Let's celebrate that. Hopefully that win turns into bigger and bigger wins for you so that we're no longer celebrating like, hey, you got out of bed, but rather, hey, you totally aced your job interview and got the job. Or hey, you just launched a rocket ship into space. But not everyone can do the rocket ship into space every single day. So how can we help you build up your confidence as you're on that journey?
Hey, that sounds amazing. But how does it recognize the individual wins of each of us? Is it like part of it? how you built it so that the scale differs based on what I talk about on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, so we don't differentiate between small and big wins. At least we're not at the moment. That's some of the feedback we want to collect from our early users to see like, hey, would you want that differentiation? Or would you want to be able to mark something as like, this is a really big win and to put more emphasis on it? But in terms of how we identify wins in general and how I would theoretically do that, that technically touches on IP, so I'm not going to share too much, but it all comes into our AI algorithm and how we the types of examples we give, the way we differentiate between like psychological thought processes on celebrating wins, and then we've also included and incorporated coaching aspects into this. So if you were working with a personal coach or career coach, how would they help you break down these small wins and big wins as you're working on whatever goal it is you're working on?
Did you suffer from imposter syndrome, or do you sometimes feel like things aren't going your way? Is this how you came up with this idea, or you saw people around you? Is this personal? How did you come up with this?
Yeah, so the initial version of HypeDocs is actually something I learned about when I was at Square, and it's very much tied to imposter syndrome for women. So the women engineering community at Square came up with the idea of HypeDocs as a way for you to track your work achievements and then use that to write self-evaluations every year. It should be no surprise that self-evaluations suck to write, but women were significantly like I'm pretty sure there's research out there to back this up, but women would consistently undersell themselves in these self-evaluations, and that has direct impact in your compensation and your ability to get promotions, etc. So or also women would be really bad at writing about some of the things that they've done that are actually really fundamentally impacting at a company or like impactful at a company, but because we think it's a small win, we might not include it when it could actually have really big impacts. And an excellent example of that is our team was about to launch a major feature. The developers dealing with that or like building that feature were based in the Canadian office, not the American office. The folks deciding on launch dates are all in the American office, and they picked, I think it was like the 1st of July to launch it. So for folks in Canada, that is Canada Day for us. Or folks outside of Canada, 1st of July is Canada Day for us. And nobody really said anything or raised anything. So it kind of could have become a situation where if we launched and there were issues, then folks would have to give up their Canada Day to go and work and figure out what the issue is, which is not like you shouldn't have to do that, especially if it's avoidable. And so for me, my small win with that scenario was I went and posted in the chat in our Slack channel, and I just asked the question, is there any way we could shift the date of this launch to the 5th or the 6th of July instead? Because then it's past Canada Day, it's past 4th of July, which is Independence in America, and we're not having to get any of our developers to potentially sacrifice their vacation day that they've earned. And also potentially having a massive issue happen with nobody around to actually deal with it. Because it's fine if one developer's on call and like gets called in, but if it is a big issue, you need more people on board. And that is a small win in terms of all I had to do was write a message and ask the question. But the impact of that is actually the type of leadership impact and that companies want to see when they're looking at promotions because they're looking at big picture or they want people that are looking at big picture and how do we make sure we're being successful and also growing good culture at the company. So to go back to your original question, sorry, I sometimes get excited and talk a lot. For the original question, that's where the original concept of HypeDocs came from, is how do we track achievements to help build your self-evaluations and in tandem with that, beat imposter syndrome and grow your confidence. The first version of HypeDocs I built out was very much in line with that, where it was just a tool you could use to track your own things. But the consistent issue I found with that and other versions of the product was getting you to write the wins. That's really tough for people because you and I are going to view things differently. And so you're going to write something, I'm going to write something different. But with this audio journaling aspect, we don't actually have to get you to go and write anything. You can just talk about your day. And it could be personal, it could be professional, it could be about your goals, it could be about like, oh, I stubbed my toe, or oh, I'm getting really frustrated in this class because the professor keeps picking on me. Like you could vent about whatever you wanted. And with the way that our algorithm works, we can still pull out those moments that are wins or those moments to help you think in a more positive way to build your confidence and to help you beat imposter syndrome.
It's been almost 3 years. What has been the most challenging part of building HypeDocs?
I think it's the sales and sales showing me, or like the data showing me that the strategy we have is not working and to pivot or to move on, like to shut down and move on. And I did actually hit that point last year where I was like, okay, the data's telling me this is not the strategy, this is not the tool. In this version of the product, it was a Slack app that we were trying to sell to businesses so that if you're on the HR team or in a leadership position, you would use this with your team so that they could write and track their wins. They can share them with you. We can then tie that into performance evaluation and things like that. My lessons learned, or like the hard pill to swallow at that time, was a lot of people really liked the idea, but two things were happening. One, jobs were getting cut across the industry, and HR jobs are usually one of the first ones to go. So I had, in 1 week, I had 3 calls with 3 separate people from 3 companies. They all loved it. With all 3 of them, we scheduled a secondary call, like, which is a big deal, at least for me, because I'm terrible at that. When it came around to their second calls the following week, all 3 of them had been let go from their separate companies. So it's just a sign of the times. And then the second big trend that was happening is people were, in like 2020, 2021, a lot of people were buying every product out there under the sun because there's lots of money floating around. Now, the opposite is happening where people are removing anything that's not immediately helping and trying to find tools that will provide you the best combination, even if it's not, even if it doesn't meet all the requirements you have. So my little tool that could integrate is not going to win out in any of these big competitions. And my goal was never to like try and beat the Lattices of the world, Lattice being one of the leading companies, rather to integrate. So that became a really hard sell. And so with those two signs, I kind of decided this is not like if I had an HR expert on my team who could sell the product better than me, maybe it would have worked out better. But the signs are telling me it's time to walk away. And I did. And then a month later, I think it was might have been close to 2 months later, I was chatting with a friend on completely unrelated stuff. They were showing me something they built with AI, and that gave me the inspiration for the version of HypeDocs we're on today, which is the AI audio-powered journaling, where we're heavily relying on AI for the transcription, for some of the other aspects, like telling you your wins and your hypes. And the reception for that has been far more positive. Um, the reception on a challenge we're about to start in 2 weeks has also been really positive. And we're like, I'm now, in the past, I would always think engineering first, build features first. Now it's very much, okay, this is the outcome I want. What marketing tools do we need to do to get that outcome? What are the minimum product features we need to build? Because I don't want to spend my time coding. I love it.
Yeah.
I don't want to not code, but I can't afford to spend my time coding if I want this to be successful. And so how do I shift the mindset into being more focused on that?
Mm. I mean, this is all super interesting. I could go on and on about this because it's such a great idea, Ashley.
Thanks.
Um, I'm going to end with this. What's the next big milestone for HypeDocs?
Yeah. So touching on the challenge, I think I don't know if that's a big milestone. I think that's a very short-term milestone. To share a little bit more, if there's a theory out there that it takes 21 days to build a habit. And so I'm playing on that concept where if I can get you to post on HypeDocs once a day, every day for 21 days, what can you do? Like, how much can you benefit from it? And are you going to build enough of a habit that you might stay on the product? So, from a product marketing perspective, makes great sense. For you as a user, it costs nothing because the first month of HypeDocs is already free. So, it's just a given. And then some of the incentives I have at the moment are swag, free access to HypeDocs for a few more months, and then a raffle for cash prizes. I don't know if those incentives are enough. We're actually trying to poll and see if anyone has ideas on what additional incentives could work because we need to make sure the benefits are strong enough that you're willing to participate. Obviously, the benefits there are you're building your confidence, you're building your self-esteem and things like that too. But yeah, that's the big sort of thing that I'm focused on in the very near term and will take up my time for the next 2 months. But I think where I see this potentially heading and growing into is once we've validated the core part of the product, what else can we do with it? And I'm going to tease this, I won't share too much, but I've already started having conversations with some experts, both in the therapy space, as well as in the medical space in general, to see ways that we could possibly link HypeDocs into some of the existing tools that they use, where HypeDocs could almost
Mhm.
be a bridge between coaching sessions, therapy sessions, and possibly even other medical situations as well, which aren't just mental health related. So I think that would be, there's many milestones we're going to hit before that, but I think getting to something like that in the next year would be incredible.
Makes a lot of sense. Ashley, thank you so much for doing this.
No
And
problem.
I can't wait to see where this goes.
Thank you so much for having me. And, feel free to ask me any more questions in the future. And to everyone listening, like hypedocs.co, check us out, or, feel free to reach out to me as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Ashley.